Ambulance. Tell me exactly what's happened. I don't know. My boyfriend's here and he's making weird noises. I don't know what is going on, right? What was he doing to me? What? What? I don't know. He's got a lot of blood in him. James, look at me, please. James. James, just look at there. Just James, just turn around, please. I don't know if he's playing around or he's got some. James, turn around. James, I've got an ambulance on the phone. Please just turn around so I know what's up with you. James. She sits on top of him in the dark street, her hands pressed against his chest. A neighbor rushes over, asking if everything's all right. She looks up calmly and says he's just drunk, that he'll sleep it off. But beneath her hands, hidden under his skin, James Knight's heart is bleeding out. A single stab wound has punctured his pulmonary artery. And with every fading heartbeat, more blood fills his chest cavity. Emma-Jayne Magson knows exactly what she's done. She's hidden the knife. She's changed her clothes. And now, as her boyfriend takes his final breaths on the cold pavement of Sylvan Street, she's telling everyone who tries to help that there's nothing to worry about. But what happens when the evidence tells a different story? What happens when a young woman stabs the man she says she loves, then watches him die while lying to everyone around her? This is the story of Emma-Jayne Magson and James Knight. A case that would be tried twice, debated by campaign groups, and leave two families shattered. It's a story about violence, manipulation, and the thin line between victim and perpetrator. Because what the jury heard in court would paint a picture far more disturbing than a simple act of self-defense. Emma-Jayne Magson enters the world in the year 1993. And from her very first months, violence shatters her life. She's only 8 months old when her father locks her mother in a flat and stabs her repeatedly, slashing at her throat and legs, while Emma and her older sister Charlotte are held in their mother's arms. The attack leaves scars, physical ones, on her mother's legs, and invisible ones that will shape Emma's understanding of love, safety, and what happens when anger takes control. Her mother has to learn to walk again. The family moves into a safe house, constantly relocating, always looking over their shoulders. For a baby too young to form conscious memories, the chaos still imprints itself somewhere deep. Emma grows up quiet, almost withdrawn, clinging to her older sister, Charlotte. The two girls share everything: a bedroom, secrets, the unspoken knowledge that their home isn't like other children's homes. Then, when Emma is 7 years old, Charlotte dies following complications from surgery. She's only 9. And in a decision born from unbearable grief, Emma's mother brings Charlotte's body home. For 2 weeks, the dead child lies in the house. First in her mother's bed, then downstairs in an open casket. Emma, still a small child herself, lives alongside her sister's corpse. Her mother later admits she didn't consider anyone but herself in that moment of anguish. But for Emma, the experience becomes another layer of trauma, another lesson that the people you love can vanish, that death can sit in your living room like an uninvited guest. As Emma moves into her teenage years, the quiet little girl begins to act out. She starts drinking at 13, seeking attention in increasingly destructive ways. Her mother recognizes the pattern. Emma is trying to be seen, to matter, to fill the void left by her sister and the stability stolen by her father's violence. But recognition doesn't equal solution. Emma drifts into relationships that mirror what she witnessed as a baby. One boyfriend fractures her skull so badly, she's hospitalized with a brain bleed. Violence, it seems, is the language Emma has learned to speak, both as victim and eventually as perpetrator. By the time she's 21, Emma has a daughter of her own. The birth is traumatic and postnatal depression settles over her like a heavy fog. She's living in Sylvan Street in Leicester, a narrow residential road where everyone knows everyone else's business, where front doors open directly onto the pavement, and neighbors can hear arguments through thin walls. Emma has convictions for violence by this point. She's punched and kicked other women. Once slashed someone's face with a glass while drunk. These aren't the actions of someone in control. They're the outbursts of a young woman who never learned how to regulate emotion, who reaches for aggression when she feels threatened or overwhelmed. Psychologists would later diagnose Emma with emotionally unstable personality disorder, also known as borderline personality disorder, and possibly a pervasive developmental disorder. These conditions affect how someone processes emotions, relationships, and stress. People with EPD often experience intense fear of abandonment, unstable self-image, and difficulty controlling anger. They can swing rapidly between idealizing and devaluing the people they love. For Emma, these undiagnosed and untreated conditions mean she's navigating relationships without the emotional tools most people take for granted. She doesn't know how to de-escalate conflict. She doesn't know how to walk away, and she doesn't know how to ask for help before things spiral out of control. In the autumn of the year 2015, Emma meets James Knight. James Knight is 26 years old when he dies, and by all accounts, he's a man people genuinely like. His friends call him King James, a nickname that speaks to his confidence and the way he commands a room. He works as a bin man in Leicester, a physically demanding job he approaches with energy and good humor. His colleague and friend John Skinner describes him as someone everyone wants to work with, someone who gets the job done while keeping the atmosphere light. James has that rare quality of making hard work feel easier just by being present. He's popular not just at work, but in his wider social circle, the kind of person who collects friends naturally. But James is defined most clearly by his role as a father. He has 2 young daughters from his previous relationship, and by all accounts he adores them. His ex-partner, the mother of his children, describes him as an amazing dad, someone who was romantic and attentive at the start of their 9-year relationship. There's no history of violence in that relationship, no police calls or hospital visits. For years, James is a stable, loving partner and father. But something shifts towards the end. James starts going to the gym obsessively, his body transforming as he builds muscle. Friends notice he's getting bigger, more focused on his appearance. What they don't all realize is that James has started using anabolic steroids. Steroids are synthetic versions of testosterone. And while they build muscle, they also affect mood and behavior. Users often experience increased aggression, irritability, and impulsivity, a cluster of symptoms sometimes called roid rage. James also begins using cocaine and smoking cannabis regularly. His ex-partner tells the Sun newspaper that the drugs cause constant arguments, that James becomes a far cry from the man she fell in love with. She begs him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Eventually, their relationship ends, and James moves in with his brother Kevin on Sylvan Street. It's there just a few doors down that James meets Emma-Jayne Magson. The relationship moves fast. James essentially moves in with Emma the day after they first sleep together. For a man whose previous relationship lasted 9 years, This speed suggests someone looking to fill a void to prove he can move on, to avoid sitting alone with his feelings. Emma gets pregnant quickly, and James seems thrilled at the prospect of becoming a father again. But the relationship is turbulent from the start. Both of them are jealous, both prone to verbal arguments, both carrying unresolved trauma and unmanaged mental health issues. In March the year 2016, Emma miscarries their baby. The loss is devastating, made worse when a hospital procedure fails to remove all the fetal tissue, and she has to return for a second intervention. According to Emma's family, James blames her for the miscarriage, calling her names even in the hospital, suggesting she's been unfaithful and that's why she lost the baby. James' mother denies this, insisting her son was simply upset and angry at the situation, not at Emma. And there's no documented evidence that James was ever arrested or charged with domestic violence. But absence of police records doesn't always mean absence of abuse. But whatever the truth, the miscarriage becomes a turning point. The fragile balance in their relationship shatters. And just 10 days later, on the Easter bank holiday weekend, Emma will pick up a steak knife and plunge it into James' heart. The night begins like so many others for Emma and James with alcohol. With tensions simmering just below the surface with the promise of an argument waiting to erupt, it's Saturday, 26th of March, the year 2016. The Easter bank holiday weekend and Leicester city centre is busy with people determined to enjoy their time off. Emma goes out with a friend planning a girls' night, but she meets up with James at a bar later in the evening. By this point, James has been drinking heavily and has cocaine in his system. The drug makes him paranoid, aggressive, possessive. He tells another man that no one is going to get his girl. A statement that reveals how he sees Emma as property, as something to be guarded. Door staff at the bar notice James' behavior and become concerned. There's an incident, details of which remain somewhat unclear, but it results in James being asked to leave. Police are called and speak to him outside. Emma, perhaps feeling responsible or simply not wanting to abandon him, decides to leave with James. They get into a taxi together, heading back to Sylvan Street. But the argument that's been brewing all evening finally breaks the surface. In the back of the taxi, Emma and James start rowing. The driver sees Emma kick out at James. The situation escalates quickly enough that the driver, unwilling to have violence in his vehicle, asks them both to get out. They're forced to walk the rest of the way home. This is where CCTV captures a crucial moment. On Poole Road, not far from Sylvan Street, cameras record James pushing Emma against a parked car with enough force that she falls to the ground. It's around 12:45 a.m. The footage is clear. James is physically aggressive. Emma is on the pavement. This moment will become central to Emma's later claims of self-defense. Evidence that James was violent towards her that night. But it's also evidence of how volatile they both are. How quickly their arguments turn physical. They make it back to Emma's house on Sylvan Street sometime between 1:10 and 1:30 a.m. What happens next occurs behind closed doors with no witnesses, no cameras, no way to know the exact sequence of events except through Emma's own account, an account that changes over time and that the jury ultimately doesn't believe. According to Emma's statement, they continue arguing in the kitchen. James grabs her by the throat, pushing her back against the sink. She says she can't breathe, that she feels pins and needles, that she reaches out desperately for something, anything to make him stop. Her hand finds a steak knife. She strikes out once, hitting James in the chest. She claims she doesn't mean to harm him, that she just wants him to let go. But the forensic evidence tells a more complicated story. The knife penetrates James' body to a depth of 11.5 centimeters. That's about 4.5 inches. It passes through one of his lungs and severs his pulmonary artery, the major blood vessel that carries blood from the heart to the lungs. This is a deep, forceful wound, not a panic scratch or a defensive swipe. Pathologists explain that James wouldn't have realized immediately how badly he was hurt. The stab wound would have felt like a punch. He wouldn't have seen blood pouring out because the bleeding was internal, filling his chest cavity rather than spilling onto his clothes. This is why what happens next is so tragic and so preventable. James is dying, but he doesn't know it yet, and neither does anyone else. James somehow makes it out of Emma's house and down the street towards his brother Kevin's home just a few doors away. He collapses face down on the pavement outside Kevin's house. At around 2:30 a.m., a neighbor, Michael Ladick, hears the commotion and comes outside. He finds Emma sitting on top of James, who's lying face down and topless in the street. Michael asks if James is all right. Emma looks up at him calmly and says James is just drunk, that he'll be fine. Michael wants to turn James over to check on him properly, but Emma is sitting on him, blocking access. She's insistent that everything is fine, that James just needs to sleep it off. Kevin Knight, James' brother, comes out as well. Emma tells him that James was beaten up by bouncers in town earlier, that he's drunk and needs to rest. Kevin believes her. Why wouldn't he? Emma is his brother's girlfriend, someone he trusts, someone who lives on the same street. Kevin helps Emma lift James and carry him back to her house. They place him on the floor of the front room. James is still alive at this point, still breathing, but the blood is filling his chest. His lung is collapsing. His heart is struggling to pump. Kevin tells his brother he'll see him tomorrow and leaves, completely unaware that James is dying. This is the moment that haunts everyone who learns about this case. Because Emma knows what she's done. She knows James has been stabbed. She's hidden the knife in Kevin's bin outside. She's taken James' blood-stained t-shirt inside her house. She's changed her own clothes. And now, with James lying on her floor, struggling to breathe, she makes a 999 call, but she doesn't tell the truth. The call is chilling in its calmness. Emma asks for an ambulance, saying her boyfriend is making weird noises and she doesn't know what's going on. The operator asks what happened. Emma says it looks like he's had a fight with someone. She doesn't mention the knife. She doesn't mention that she stabbed him. When the operator explains that it's a busy bank holiday weekend and the ambulance might take a while, Emma responds with words that will be played in court. Words that will define how the jury sees her. No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. No, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Those 7 words encapsulate everything the prosecution will argue about Emma's character. She's not panicking. She's not begging them to hurry. She's not performing CPR or applying pressure to a wound. She's telling them not to worry. The operator doesn't know James has been stabbed, so they don't understand the urgency. And Emma doesn't tell them. We'll get someone sent over to him. It's been arranged. I mean, might take a while. So, I do apologize. It's bank holiday weekend and we're getting absolutely, no, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, if you can just keep doing. It looks like he's just ___ sleep, but you know what? It's a bit worrying 'cause normally he gets up and get in bed. About 40 minutes pass. James is still alive, but barely. His breathing is labored, his body shutting down. Emma finally starts screaming, banging on Kevin's door, shouting that James is dead. Kevin rushes over. Michael Laddick is already there, having heard Emma's screams. Michael starts trying to save James' life, giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, performing CPR. It's only when Michael gives the second breath and James' chest rises that the stab wound opens and Michael sees it. His eyes, he later says, popped out of his head. He grabs the phone from Kevin and tells the operator that James has been stabbed in the heart. Michael continues CPR for another 15 minutes, desperately trying to keep James alive. Emma is getting in the way, crying, saying she wants him back, begging James to wake up. Kevin has to physically drag her off so Michael can continue the resuscitation attempts, but it's too late. James Knight dies there on Emma's floor, his heart finally giving out, his lungs filled with blood. He's 26 years old. His 2 young daughters will grow up without their father. And the woman who stabbed him is calling her grandmother, saying she thinks she's killed him. The forensic timeline is crucial. James is stabbed sometime between 1:10 and 1:30 a.m. He collapses outside Kevin's house around 2:30 a.m. Emma makes the 999 call, but tells them not to worry about the delay. She doesn't start screaming for help until around 3:10 a.m. That's nearly 2 hours after the stabbing. Pathologists can't say definitively whether James would have survived if Emma had told the truth immediately. If she'd said, "I've stabbed him. Please hurry. He's bleeding internally." But they can say that every minute mattered. That internal bleeding from a severed pulmonary artery is survivable if treated quickly enough. Emma's lies, her calmness, her decision to hide the evidence and change her clothes. These choices steal whatever chance James might have had. But one thing is certain. James Knight dies a preventable death, bleeding out on the floor while the person who stabbed him tells emergency services not to worry. What would you have done if you were the neighbor that night? Would you have known something was wrong? Emma-Jayne Magson is arrested after her mother calls the police and tells them what Emma has confessed, that she thinks she killed James. Initially, police don't realize Emma is responsible for the stabbing. They allow her to go to her mother's house where she's permitted to say goodbye to her 4-year-old daughter before being taken into custody. So, you've all been out tonight. No, I've been at home. You've been out with him. I don't care right now. Just get. Listen. We need to find out what's happened. I don't care as long as he's alive. Come here. I'm going to get some. Okay. Do you know what's happened? I want my boy. Came, let's say 45 minutes ago, and I see him lying on the floor. We got my torch. We didn't know until we just. It's a moment that will haunt Emma's family. The little girl watching her mother being led away, not understanding why, not knowing it will be years before they can be together properly again. The case goes to trial at Leicester Crown Court in October and November, the year 2016. Unusually for someone accused of murder, Emma remains on bail throughout the trial, a decision that suggests the court doesn't view her as a significant flight risk or danger to the public. Her legal team argues 3 potential defenses: self-defense, lack of intent to kill or cause serious harm, and loss of control. All 3 defenses, if successful, would reduce the charge from murder to manslaughter or result in acquittal. But to succeed, the jury needs to believe Emma's version of events, that James was strangling her, that she grabbed the knife in desperation, that she didn't mean to hurt him seriously. Emma makes a decision that will prove crucial. She chooses not to give evidence in her own defense. She doesn't take the stand, doesn't answer questions, doesn't look the jury in the eye and tell them what happened. Her family later says she was scared, that she didn't understand the legal process, that she's slow on the uptake and needed support to follow what was happening in court. They believe she should have had an intermediary, someone to help her understand and participate effectively. But without Emma's testimony, the jury only has her written statement, the forensic evidence, and the testimony of witnesses who heard her lies. The jury deliberates and returns a guilty verdict. This case first flickered into the shadows of Sylvan Street that fateful night, building from whispers of neighbors into a thunderous courtroom storm that gripped hearts and headlines alike, each detail unfolding like a twisted vine, deeper, darker, deadlier, pulling us all into its relentless grip of tragedy, truth, and the raw ache of what could have been avoided, leaving echoes that still chill the soul today.